Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome everyone to Talent Bites. My name is Temi Lukatebi. I'm a first year MBA student here at Esade and the VP of Blacks in Business and Allies Club. One of our objectives of the club is to highlight uh, current leaders from diverse backgrounds and foster meaningful conversations on leadership, development, and career perspective in a variety of sectors. This was made tangible by the Esade Talent Bites series in collaborations with JNL Recruitment and Esade Careers. We hope that you, the audience, will enjoy the conversation from our guest today. You will also be able to find more details of the Blacks in Business and Allies Club via our LinkedIn page. We encourage you to follow our page to keep up to date on more exciting future events from the club. With that being said, please join me for the third edition of Talent Bites and welcoming our host, Kobi Ampoma of JNL Recruitment, and our guest today, Salma, who is VP of People at Skyscannerl. A special note to the audience is that during the conversation, you will be able to ask questions via the chat function. I turn it over to you, Kobi.
Thank you very much for introducing me, Temi, and welcome everybody. Like Temi said, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending when you are. I'm very, very delighted this evening to host this session with Esade and obviously have Selma here today. Selma is currently the VP or Chief People Officer, as some companies call it, at Skyscannerl. And I would like to have a candid conversation with her. And obviously, welcome, Salma.
Yeah, hi. I noticed that Tara didn't try to do the surname that we talked about. That sound is a tricky one, right? Yeah.
uh, but Salma, what we're going to do today is obviously talk to you about how you actually started your career in HR. But before we even start that session, I think it will be good to share with our audience, a little bit of your background, your upbringing, where you grew up, so that we get to know you a little bit as well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, of course. Always happy to share. Let's see. I do with this sort of intro. I normally do it when I'm meeting external people, often for the first time. So I'll do it here. It's sort of interesting, which is I tend to say, you can hear by my voice that I'm raised in Britain, by the colour of my skin that I'm mixed race, and by my name that I picked up a Dutch husband. And I think that just, like a small whistle stop tour, really. I grew up in Birmingham, which is the second biggest city in Britain. And the mixed race is that my mother is English, white, and my father was born in India, raised in Pakistan. So part of that, he was part of the partition that happened there in the 40s. And it was sort of funny, I have two older brothers. So I'm the baby sister by quite a long way. They're like 6 and 9 years older than me. And my parents, both social workers by background. So, very left wing, working class, family roots. And we really grew up we were very fortunate. My father had done these things called the pools, which back in the day was like a sort of a mini lottery where you could win a bit of money. And the family won just enough that we were able to move house into a better district. And so the consequence being that we grew up as like the only non-white people in the neighborhood. And that always, it shapes your formative years. I was only 3 when that happened. And so there was quite a lot in that to sort of digest, and what comes with being the odd one. And I'm trying to think of the only way I can sort of describe it is when Corona happened, and when Corona first came, like I guess 2 years ago now. What happened at the beginning was you'd be walking down the street and people would cross the road to give you space. And after it first happened, I went home to my husband and I was like, it's like being a teenager again, or a kid growing up, where people cross the road because you don't look like they do, and that sort of a fear. But I was saying that, but actually I had a, you know, extremely privileged, really grew up well, in a loving environment. Unfortunately, my parents' marriage broke down when I was in my late teens. And that was for all sorts of reasons. And now one of my brothers lives in the US and my other brother's in Britain, and I'm here in the Netherlands. So we've ended up being a little bit all over the place. And I guess you asked a bit about how I grew up, and I guess that's the best way to give you a whistle-stop tour of that.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, Selma. And I think, you know, when you do intros, I think it's very important to share, you know, who you are, but also, you know, who you do in your intro. Obviously, I've heard your intro before in a different setting, and I'll share a little bit about that. But it gives so much about an individual, you know, and I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Also to share with the audience. For me, you know, you gave me my opportunity to head up the TA function, you know, back at our previous jobs. And I thought it was a privilege, obviously, to work for you. And what I really liked is, you know, that you really took time after our interview process to really get to know me. I remember, you know, us having lunch, and I think we sat for like 1.5, maybe 2 hours, where we shared so many different topics. And I thought that was very unique. Obviously, I'm a recruiter, but I've never experienced that before. Also with, you know, senior leaders that I've worked with. So I really like that approach. And I think I do that now, that I take time to also sit with individuals after the process to get to know them a little bit better as well. So thank you for teaching me that. The next question I have, Salma, is, you know, if you look back, what is the one thing that you wish, you know, you've known when you started your career? Because I know you don't have a traditional career when it comes to HR, but what would you maybe have wished?
Yeah, mine was a mixed bag of a career. So started out, did a few years in finance, and then about 7 years in sales before I went into HR, and then did my master's in HR while I was working full time. There's something. What the question was? What do I wish that I'd done differently? Was that
Of
the?
what you wish you would have known?
Yeah, I think there's something in really understanding how also valuable you are to an organization. You know, at the very beginning of your career, certainly for me, I spent quite a lot of time, you know, you spend a lot of time trying to get a job, trying to, like, you know, you sort of take anything, putting your hand up for projects. And I don't think I didn't appreciate also the value that employees have to an organization. That sounds funny because now, of course, that's my entire role, is about appreciating the value of employees. But in those at the beginning of my career, to really also have more confidence and to appreciate the value that I brought to an organization, as well as what they gave me, of course.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's very important nowadays. We talk about, you know, what you bring to the table and what the organization has to offer, and, you know, through experience you learn that along the way. But I think for people starting their journey, maybe it's good to already think about that as well. And that's a great answer, actually. Is there anything that, you know, you see as a big failure looking at your career? And you know, what can you share with us around that?
It's funny, I was at lunchtime today, because we're working from home, so my husband's also working from home. So over lunch today, we were talking about, I'd done an intro this morning. I was meeting with a commercial team and did an introduction of myself, and it was fairly light touch, and it felt a little bit fickle in that sense. And, you know, you're doing like a run through of your sort of CV. But it's funny, when you talk about the jobs that you've had, or your CV, as it were, what you don't see in that run through is also all the opportunities that you didn't take, or the jobs that you didn't get, or the failures along the way, you know. And that's quite difficult, because it's not that there's just one. I mean, you know, my career wasn't that I thought about doing a job and then I got it, and then I thought about doing another job and I got it. That's definitely not been the path for me. So I think, you know, in the early times, it was really scattering, you know, trying to get onto graduate programs when I left university, and then all of those experiences. You know, I went through the Mars program. I did Ernst and Young. They weren't even called that. I did another one of the big four, whose name I forget, because they've all merged in that since then. I did the Bass Brewers one, which that was the one that I passed. And then in the end, they didn't put me on the graduate scheme, but they gave me a job, a real job that you get after you finish the graduate scheme, which was sort of in of itself both a success and a failure, because I was going for the scheme. And then and so it's sort of funny, you know, there's failures in that sense. So what are the roles that you were going for that you don't get, that end up sort of shaping your career in one way or another, because then you meet people and you have new opportunities that you weren't going for. Or there's also failures where like, for example, I'd done this. I was working in human resources at this point. I'd taken my first international assignment, and there was a voice conference, and I'd asked a question at this voice conference, and it ended up damaging the relationship with the person that was running it. They didn't know me, and they found the question sort of obtuse. And that had like a long-lasting impact on me, myself, like my confidence, but also then how I think about second chances and how I think about, you know, wait a minute, after I reflected on that, it felt ridiculous that a senior person would be offended by a question asked, because, you know, you're always trying to elicit feedback and elicit response. So it was, you know, it really made me, and I still think about it, you know, hold on a minute, what do I do when I'm judging people? And just take a step a minute. Let's give people another chance, you know, even if it can take a damage to some trust. Wait a minute, what can I do to help build a bridge there? So there's failures in like the jobs that you go for, and there's failures in sort of the way that you behave, perhaps, that also you know, stick with you, those things that stick with you, that wake you up in the middle of the night still sometimes. Hold on a minute, what happened there?
But Salma, I would like to share a story as well, which I really, really like about you and how our relationship started. I remember when I started your team at Travix, I was supposed to deliver something and I didn't deliver it on the deadline that you indicated. And because you were not physically in the office, I thought, oh, I'll do it on Monday. And then we had a conversation about it. Well, you said that you would do that. You actually didn't do it. Although I'm not physically present, it doesn't mean that you don't have to do that. And you mentioned to me that, Kobi, listen, our relationship is built on trust, right? It doesn't mean that if you don't do something, I completely lose the trust. Yeah. But you get another opportunity to build the trust. And I've always, since that day, have always kept it in the back of my mind that, you know, when you go into a relationship, especially, you know, managing teams, that analogy has always stuck to me. Yeah. Of course, something can happen, but then how do you make sure that you explain to an individual how they can potentially gain back the trust? So yeah. I thank you.
Well, that was genuinely from that experience that I have, that I felt in the end, you know, you need to start with a bank of chips, of trust chips, you know, and one transaction that takes it away shouldn't remove the whole. It's so easy to judge. It is very easy to do it, but you don't realize how impactful that can be to people. And I think everybody comes to work wanting to do their best and trying to impress, you know, we all do.
Yeah. So, you know, like I said, it has also stuck with me, and how I pass that on to others. Yeah. Is there any resources or sources that you use or tap into, you know, along your career? Think about mentorships, people who, you know, maybe helped you get where you are.
Yeah, I would maybe even think about it. If you ask me that, And I quickly brainstormed with myself. I could think about it, resources in all sorts of ways. So I could think about resources in terms of, there's some knowledge moments as well that you kind of bank. So I mentioned that I'd done my master's while I was working, so I did my master's later part-time. I also had done a postgrad, and those materials that you study and read through that time is a resource that you don't realize that you will come back to. It gives you like a solid foundation. And then, like you mentioned, people in terms of supporting resources, there are often it's managers that have had very influential moments on my career, and they've either been influential because of the experiences that they've given me, like they've given me a chance to do something really big and impactful, or they've really given me feedback that was both timely and like super relevant and well observed, like something really that you're like, that is important for me, and I should look at that, or I should change that. So there's been people in my life that have helped either with an experience that they've given me, or like a feedback. And I think when the other sort of resource, and maybe it's not a resource, but the other way I sort of think about my life, and when you see people in a HR environment, you often see people sometimes that are coming towards a burnout. It's a phrase that we use in the Netherlands when we see people at high stress. And I tend to be grateful for the fact that I've got some stable legs to a table. I can sort of think of life as a little bit of a table with 4 strong legs, and your mental and your physical health as being 2 of those legs. And then you've got your family and your work as the other 2. And, a table can stand brilliantly on 4 legs. And maybe even if one of those legs goes, you're still okay. And if 2 of those legs goes, you're really on a rocky front. And if 3 goes, then you're probably heading for a burnout. And so I think as well, the resource of, I think part of that is both luck and circumstance that I've been able to maintain mental and physical health has made me feel like I've always had a stability, even if other legs on the table might wobble at different times.
That's a great way to explain it. Obviously we're going through different times where, your job or looking for opportunity, and the burden of trying to deliver results, and home, trying to balancing all those different acts, it can be a challenge. And I think you've broken it down really,
I think it's
simple.
like, exactly, it's a bit with the COVID situation, how that impacted people. It would have been even harder to manage the change to, and then like say whichever one of those legs. So maybe something happened to people's jobs. A lot of people might have been made redundant during that situation. Many people suffered with their mental health because, that sort of isolation and the distance that was created between families. So I think depending perhaps on the stability of your legs might have also had an influence on how people were able to flow through that period.
Yeah, and I think this is maybe a good transition to the next question. Obviously, as a people leader in the travel industry, with the impact that the pandemic has had, you have navigated the function together with your leaders. If possible, can you share how you were able to even manage to do that as a people leader?
Yeah, it's very tricky because you're navigating something that there isn't a rule book for, and everybody in the world is trying to go through this together. And the sort of the first immediate impact, being in the travel industry, you felt a little bit on that front line, because what started to happen very, very quickly with the immediate effect was that people's flights were being cancelled, the bookings were being cancelled. And you probably remember at that time, we had like everybody in our organization trying to scramble to answer customer queries because you're not equipped to answer that many problems. So I think we even had people in our recruitment team that were retraining, like upskilling to be able to answer customer queries. So there was like an immediate need for people in my position to respond to the business needs first, because it was the customer needs, you know, you sort of there in service of your customers. And then very quickly that became, and the employees, you know, school started to shut down. And if you don't mind me sharing, Kobi, you know, you had 3 children. I remember us being like, Kobi, just go, you know, like, you go and do that, do all of that, whether that's homeschooling, being there, because, you know, how could I expect any work to come on top of having to care for 3 children? So there was also some sort of immediate response. And then as it's gone into the longer term, we're really still trying to navigate, okay, what does this mean for the way of work? You know, we've changed this way of working from home to working in the office, and that comes with so many pros and so many cons. So, you know, if I think about the cons side of it for a second, that the connection that you get from spending an hour and a half over lunch with somebody, and talking and, you know, being really close, is very difficult to do by Zoom. What I notice for myself now is my world of work has got so much smaller. The people that I interact with over Zoom calls are often the same people. So this year, you know, I've made it a commitment to myself to just try to meet people throughout the organization that I would have done in the office environment. I would have bumped into over a coffee machine or shared a train into the office with. And then the pros, of course, is, well, this way that you're able to, you know, reducing those commuting times, being available, feeling like you can still achieve and be more efficient. So, you know, some of those physical barriers that are there for some people got immediately removed by working from home.
Yeah. And I remember, Salma, as well, is you pulling the team together and say, hey, this is going to be our new norm. We don't know how long it's going to take. What can we do differently now? Right. So we had people who were joining the organization from a virtual onboarding perspective. How do we get laptops out? Lucky enough, I believe, you know, we had the right tooling so people could go on Zoom calls and whatnot, but other companies were trying to catch on. You know, how do we do calls now that we are all from home? And I believe also that one of the things that I think was great, I think you mentioned in one of our meetings, you know, letting our CEO know what impact it has on people with kids, right? So, and I remember making an effort saying, hey, we know how challenging it is at home. You know, take the time that you need. Just make sure that you have proper arrangements with your managers or with your leaders on when, you know, things are going to be delivered. And I think that was constantly something that was being echoed, you know, within the organization. And I think that's a good sign.
Yeah. Well, it was funny, you know, in that in Travix as well, and the company I'm in now, there's a lot of international people. And so there, as well as people with children, you had a lot of people who were living in the Netherlands who didn't have family and friends and support networks around them. So everybody had sort of different needs. You know, the call from the government at that time was really close the office. And we sort of were trying to do everything we could to at least keep the facility open, in case there was 1 or 2 people that just needed to get out of their home environment, because not everybody lives in the same space, you know, in the same environment where they might feel happy or comfortable, or, you know, and if you're on your own and lonely, you know, we were really, as well, there's sort of real different types of employees. So ones with families, third country nationals, people coming from different countries. So we were running to try to be as empathetic to the needs of the people.
Yeah. Well, I think you did a great job. And, you know, as a people leader, I think people look at how they can rely on, you know, some kind of empathy in whatever situation they're dealing with as well. And I think you did a great job.
That's good.
100%.
I'm sure there's many that I'm sure there's a retrospective happening. I feel like the theses of the future are many to be written about this time and how we handled it.
And what is your you know, opinion or in terms of the travel industry right now? I mean, we're 2 years down the line. What is the current travel industry state in your opinion?
Yeah, it's one of those travel is one of those things that doesn't really go away as a desire. So what you see is it's also, as soon as governments or countries change their rules or response to it, you'll see an immediate reaction in travel bookings, like literally immediately, because there's still a lot of desire for people to have experiences. So that experiential thing is still there. And the way that people had moved around globally meant that people are not just traveling for holiday. There's also a lot of family connection. You know, like I said, my mother lives in a different country to me. My brother lives in a different country even still. So people travel for work, for vacation, and also for family. And then other reasons too, whether that's weddings or funerals or all the cacophony of things that bring people together. The shifts that you might start to see in my head would be in a response to sustainability, and that, you know, how might people feel about, like, I'm in flying, for example, at the moment. Skyscannerl is flight search, so this is about flights specifically. So whether people will think about those flights experiences and do them slightly differently, so go more long haul and perhaps look for alternatives for very shorter distance flights. Like, you know, you could, I think theoretically you can fly very short even within, you know, within countries, and perhaps people might change the way that they think and be more looking for alternatives. But to experience the world, to connect, you know, travel is something much more than just a flight. It's really an experience. It's really about connection, and it's a way to continue to be empathetic. You know, if you've ever lived in another country, it's, you know, lived in Ethiopia for a couple of years, lived in Suriname for 6 to 9 months, lived in Britain, lived in the Netherlands. And every time you take one of those moments to genuinely absorb yourself in another culture, you really understand what are the challenges. And that leads to innovation, of course, because you're like, oh, you know, what about this? And this would be helpful here. But it also helps to bring the world closer together. So I think, for, you know, there's travel is, for me, much more than a flight. But I think maybe with sustainability, we might see people thinking about longer journeys or different experiences, how they use that. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Obviously, we have a lot of people, you know, tuning in from a younger generation, looking to make a career, male or female. What kind of advice do you have for a younger generation looking to make a career? I mean, we have, you know, the Gen Zs, the millennials. You know, what is your advice on that?
Oh my word, Kobi. I mean, I can break it down into a couple of things. So maybe just getting into the workforce, that sort of interview process. I mean, you are much more of an expert than I in this. This is literally your full depth in terms of recruitment. But when you first meet people in those moments, when candidates are able to express their experience and show also the so what of it. What did they learn from that? What was their takeaway from that experience? How did that shape them? That always makes a deeper connection when they know about the company and show genuine passion and have done some research. You know, even if they've done like a sort of a quick PESTLE analysis, you know, that sort of political environmental scan of a company, and you can hear it when they're talking to you as a recruiter, you know that, and it just makes a candidate experience more memorable, more touching. And when people can both show what they've done and a sense of humility, and that they can work with other people, you know, like they have a character, and you know, that also really resonates. It stays with you, don't you think? You know, when you see people in an interview experience.
Yeah, what I tell people is, first of all, know the job. So, obviously
Yeah,
try to understand what am I actually getting myself into.
yeah,
And I believe people don't always know the job, but what can you do to improve that percentage? So
yeah,
if you know 50% of the job, ask questions to increase that percentage. That's
yeah,
that's one thing I always tell people, which is very simple, but also what are you going to bring? So what is your added value? What kind of
yeah,
examples can you share in your conversation that you can actually add value to the team?
yeah,
If you have more experience, is maybe a little bit easier, but if not, what would you like to learn, right? So
yeah,
I believe in that. And then the third one is, a little bit of your personality. So who are you, and what
yeah,
are your values, so that people can also remind, okay, if I bring Kobi to my team, he is a good guy, he loves that, he's bringing this to the table, that resonate with people, I believe, a
yeah.
majority of the time. Yeah.
And anything you can do to make it two-way like this, you know, asking a question at some point. And it's difficult because it requires some that you've taken a breath, that you know, taken an ease. I always love the Superman pose before I go into an interview. Give yourself a bit of that confidence, you know, and some genuine deep breaths to ground you before you go in. Because it is, you know, Kobi, you're a real person. You're a genuine real person, and every time you go into an interview, I think you must feel like me, which is you want that person to do really well, you know, like you're sort of like, please, you know, let them bring the best of themselves, because on paper, for them to have got to that point, you already feel like they've got a good skills and experience match. So at this point you really want people to do well. So a few deep breaths and being confident and trying to generate a conversation, right?
I love that. That's the intention, and I think, when people don't make the cut as we sail it, you want to make sure that they have something that they can also improve or work on for the next opportunity that they have.
Yeah,
Just making sure that they're better prepared. I
yeah.
love that. Salma, who has been very influential in your career? If you could share anybody, that this person had really made an impact in my career.
Yeah, I feel lucky. There's been a few. I feel
Okay,
lucky. There's
that's
been
good.
a few.
We
Been
can
a
highlight a
few.
few people then.
I can highlight a few. Yeah, I mean, back in when I was learning to be a trainer, I really was very new at that. And there was a woman called Trudy Campbell who was a peer of mine, but she really helped like hold my hand through that upskilling period. And then, you know, giving you the confidence to say, now you're doing it on your own. But she was at the back of the room. So that also the backup. So you feel like you're on the seat of your pants, you're flying, you're doing this, but there was always a backup. And then one of my bosses, Jim Parker, was so honest in his feedback with me, a bit like you. I'd not achieved something to his expectations, and he didn't hold that to himself. You know, he really shared it very clearly with me, what it was that he expected. And this is, then it's so helpful. It's so helpful to be very clear and transparent with people that work for you. And that stayed with me for a long time. And then I had both Michael O'Hare and Remco Verhull and now John Mangalars, the challenges that they've put in front of me. Like, here's a job, go and do it well. Oof, you know, when people give you that trust and then they let you go and do something, that's been amazing. And then Usha Kakaria would be another one for me that was just on the money when it came to constant feedback, a manager that would, you know, keep giving you feedback and not shy away from it. And I'm somebody that's hungry for it. And so it's almost worse for me to sit in an abyss without anything. And when managers can really be open and upfront, and they've got a good intention, right? That counts. That counts. They've got to be in it with a good intention. Then those people have really had just a massive lasting impact on me.
Well, Salma, thank you very much for that. I want the audience to, capture how you mention everybody's name who had an impact in your career. No, because I think that's very important. I have something similar where everybody who has made an impact, you remember the name, you remember the moment, or you remember the same moment. So I think this is a great way to share with our audience, how impactful some people could be in your career and the things that you could learn from them as well. So I really, really love that. I think what is important to you when you look at talent? So when you're looking for talent for your organization, what do you look for? Is it something specific or is it something general? Can you share anything around that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were talking a little bit there about that sort of skills and experience, that's the match from the CV, right? So that's always got to be there. But the culture aspect, and what I realize more and more is that I'm not looking so much for the culture match, but for the culture add. So how are people adding to your team, to my team, to the company? They don't have to be replicas, but it has to be in terms of the values, at Skyscannerl, looking for people that really act like an owner, so have that ownership, taking ownership for their roles, feeling empowered, and then acting to move, and really putting the traveller first at everything you do. When you come across people that have that sort of passion and demonstrate that they want to, they're not waiting, and that really shows out. And then you think as a company, okay, well, maybe if people have even an 80% skills match to the job that they've got, or experience match, we can give the rest. We also have a responsibility, so we can give the rest. But finding the people that sing to your values when you meet them up front, and like I say, every organization has a different set, which is why it's always worth having a look. And it feels like that's often the match. And when you're going through that process, being a manager and an employee, that's a special relationship, and you spend a lot of time, you invest a lot of time in those relationships, you work together for a lot. And so trying to find people that also, make the best team, really bring a dynamic to the team. I think that's also what I'm looking for, which means then it changes. It can change, depending on the shape of the team that you're in, the organization that you're in. Unfortunately, that doesn't stay as a constant. But the sort of, I guess, what would be constant is when people put themselves forward. Can't really express that enough, that courage. I wish I'd been more courageous. You were asking those things at the beginning of your career. People that are courageous to put themselves forward, to ask. It's, those types of behaviors when you see it, and when they learn to ask well, like ask in a one-to-one, then it's really appreciated, that side of things you really value.
Yeah. And you mentioned, cultural add. That's something that obviously the last couple of years is a very big topic in terms of, cultural fit, but, adjusting that to cultural add. That brings me to, diversity and inclusion, and even, belonging. I know that plays a very important role for you. Can you share why that is something that is also dear to your heart? And as a people leader, everybody has been talking about this topic, at least for the last 2 years, pretty much heavy. What resonates with you when we talk about diversity and inclusion? What role do you play in as a people leader?
I think what resonates with me most, you started this, Kobi, by asking me a bit about myself and how I grew up. And maybe it's as a factor of that, like being on the outside. At home, in the home environment, I've always felt on the outside, even inside my home, and that's all for all different sorts of reasons. But also then in the neighbourhood, in the school, always feeling like an outsider. And I think the office environment, the work environment, can offer something really special in that sense. You know, you can really create places of belonging because people are valued for the skills that they bring, rather than for the colour of their skin or their physical abilities. You know, it might be more their mental abilities, or it might be their physical, depending on the job. But, you know, it's the work environment in that sense, often for me, has been more of a home than the local neighbourhood. And that's sort of emotional in that sense. You know, I feel emotional about it. And so that's where I think nobody wants to be the only female on a team, or the only black person, or the only, in my case, brown person in a team. You want to be, you want to not be recognised for those things. You want to be in a place where you're recognised for your skills. And when the mix is more mixed, you can really feel that you're empowered to just do your best work. And that's where I think diversity it plays an important part, in terms of that the feeling is the inclusion part of things. And then, you know, the equity is something that it's a complex subject for me at the moment. I'm trying to really understand, what does it mean to be in an equitable organisation? And there's all sorts of great diagrams that try and show you what equity means instead of equality. Like, give you a quick, there's one where you've got three people trying to watch a football game behind a fence, and one's a tall person, one's a slightly shorter person, and one's a really short person. And equality would be giving each one of them a box to stand on. And if you gave them all a box to stand on, the person that could see over the fence can see over better. The person that's slightly shorter can now see over, and the person that's really short still can't see over. And so equity in this diagram would be not giving the tall person a box, giving the slightly shorter one box to stand on, and giving the very short person two boxes. And then the diagram goes further, saying, you know, maybe just take away the fence, and then you don't have to give any boxes, you've taken away the obstacle. And it's a simple diagram, but it talks to a topic that's very complex to understand, in terms of how do you make organisations, what are the actions that you take within an organisation to make it feel equitable? And how do people emotionally feel, either receiving or watching others receive what might be perceived as special treatment? And, you know, so you're trying to stay away from that, and instead try to go towards those removing the blockers. So I think emotionally for me, it's a topic, because I felt very safe in work environments where they do that well. And that's where you want, you know, like, you want your teams to thrive. And if we can do that with our work environments, then we're winning.
Yeah. Thank you for elaborating. Salma, obviously you're going to do great things. I know that for sure.
Oh, Kobi, you're too flattering.
Well, what have you, if you look back in your career so far, what would be, you know, in terms of, you know, any accomplishment that you're very, very proud of?
Things that I was proud of in my career.
Yeah, if you can name at least one. You can also add two if you have two, more than one.
Oh my word. You know, maybe I would distill it down into when I've said yes to something that's really frightened me. Like, even moving to the Netherlands for the first time, that was terrifying. That was terrifying. And then that went well. Met my husband, have a child out of that, and great job. You know, so I think most proud of would be those moments for myself. And you know, and then you're most proud of the other part of it is when you see the people that work for you flying in whatever aspect that fulfills their life, you know. And that can be anything. It can be setting up your own business. It can be when you see them taking new roles. But like I say, you invest a lot in those relationships with people. So you end up getting close with the teams and seeing them fly. So I think it's in your career, you have sort of two aspects, the things for yourself where you've, like I said, where I felt courageous because I've done something. And then when you feel proud for people within the team that are doing courageous things, and you feel like you've played the smallest part to give them wings to fly.
Yeah, that's a good way to answer. I think, it's a good moment to bring in Tammy. Tammy has also a few questions from the Esade business students as well. So Tammy, I'm going to give you the floor, and then I'll wrap up after you.
Thanks, Kobi. And by the way, great conversation. Learned so much, Selma. Thank you for sharing your experience. I'm sure myself and other Esade colleagues here are going to have learned a lot. The first question I kind of wanted to provide to you is actually going back towards a diversity and inclusion question. So you can tell that kind of tugs on your heart a bit.
Yeah.
And kind of the first question I wanted to pose to you is, there's a lot of DE&I initiatives that we've heard about in the past couple of years that Kobi mentioned. So I kind of wanted to maybe get a sense from you if you've seen recently, whether it be in your industry, at your company, any D&I initiatives at your company that have been implemented or ones that you're aware of, and how effective they are, or how do you guys measure it, so to speak?
Yeah, the measurement of the DEI initiatives is definitely tricky, so measurement is always going to be a tricky thing in that respect. We have engagement surveys, so I think people share with their voice and they share with their feet, so do they stay with you? How do they talk about you on on Glassdoor, where I was going. How do they talk about you on Glassdoor, and how do they talk about you with their feet and share their opinion in their employment survey, and the referrals? Do they bring a friend who wants to come and work for you? Do they also tap people on the shoulder and say, hey, come and work here at this place, it's a great place to be? So the measurement is, I would say, is pretty tricky, and something you want to do. In the UK, they have things that are also very official, like gender pay gap reports and things like that, where you really are required to report on very specific dynamics. So we take part in things like that. And the initiatives that that implemented that make an impact, even in some of those ways of having people come and talk about their experience, you shouldn't underestimate how big that is when people it takes quite a bit. It's a bit vulnerable actually to share where you're from, and some of those, I say it a little bit lighthearted about people crossing the road or being an outsider, but if you would dig under the surface of there, Temi, it would be, it's quite vulnerable to share those pieces. So having people share that helps people be empathetic towards each other, giving people language that's okay to use and not okay to use. Things like that also make a nudge towards it, as well as, of course, making sure that people are paid fairly for their roles and not because of the color of their skin or their gender or things like that. So there's harder, softer, and listening tools that you can use in that space.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And it's, again, a conversation I think we're all here at Esade learning, and we're trying to gain experience from those in the industry. So it's glad to hear it's also complex for you as well, because it's a complex challenge for us as well. The next question I would have is actually goes back very early in the conversation. So from jump, I kind of understood you seem to be an effective leader. One thing you mentioned was that, or Kobi had mentioned, was how he was able to receive feedback from you, gain trust from you. So kind of as a leader, you like what do you deem to be the soft skills necessary for a leader in a leadership position? The most important soft skills, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, the feedback piece, it is so important. It's so important. And it's something that you can practice at home, like finding a voice to share what you want. That's important. You need to be able to express yourself, and being able to observe in others and being able to provide feedback, but it coming from a place of good intent, and being able to share that it's coming from a place of good intent. You need to, and sorry for my language, but really give a shit about people. You need to care, right? And then learn to be able to identify and share. So I think feedback, it's so easily said, and there's so many books written about it. I mean, Radical Candor is probably one of my favorite that I dip in and out of all the time. But I think it's because the way feedback is expressed in there is around this good intentions first, be coming from a good heart place, and don't hold on to it. And I think that's so important for leaders in senior roles, because you're interacting with so many people and influencing their work. And so being able to share, find your voice, express what you want, and also be able to care about people and give feedback. So that's probably in a nutshell.
Okay, and then the next question would be, kind of, you did mention this earlier, which is kind of funny. I'm sure some of my Esade colleagues would find this funny, about the pestle analysis, as that's something we did in the last term. But do you have any recommendations, especially for MBA students who you might be recruiting for, how they can be memorable when it comes to the talent acquisition process?
Yeah, so it really is, like you can tell, Temi, when somebody is sitting in front of you in an interview, if they just quickly Googled you and and got the strap line, the mission statement, or if they actually just spent even half an hour thinking about, oh, okay, Skyscanner's in the travel industry. I wonder what might be going on for not just Skyscanner, but you can imagine any travel industry company, travel tech. Let's broaden that out for a second. What's going on for a travel tech company right now? And then you do that quick pestle. It is very highly recommended. It's a good tool. It'll stay with you forever. Like I said, some of those tools from your school days, they're gonna stick with you. And then you can tell. So Kobi knows it when he sees somebody that spent even a minute thinking about that role and that company. It shines in the answers. And then having people be able to express their learnings from the so what, and this happened to me and this is what I learned from that, or this is how it shaped me, is like, oh, that's smart. That's somebody that's reflecting and learning, that shows some learning agility.
And just to comment on that, I do believe that learning agility is very, very important, together with self-reflection. Because if you're not willing to look into the mirror and see what can I do differently, you are not going to really progress in your career. So I do believe that's a very key skill for people to have.
Yeah. It's funny because sometimes there's some old traditional interview questions that do the rounds, right? That what 3 strengths and what 3 weaknesses, they're classics, they're classic questions. And sometimes you might meet somebody that will have like no expressed weaknesses, or they'll try to shave it as like a positive, oh, my weakness might be that I work really too hard. You're like, no, that's not. And then you really, when I think about that question, what are your weaknesses? I've got hundreds. How long have you got? Give me a minute, because here they are. I'm working on them, and these are the ones that I work really hard at. And yeah.
So I know we have a time limit here. So I do first, before passing it over to Kobi to do the conclusion. Again, I want to thank you, Selma, for taking the time to do the talk. Again, I myself have learned a lot. I'm sure my peers as well. Before I pass it to Kobi, though, I did want to kind of get a fun question, hopefully out there that you can answer. Again, you work for Skyscanner, so kind of, and you've lived in various different locations. So if you can go on Skyscanner right now and book a ticket somewhere, where would it be?
Oh man, I think about all those countries that are really tourist dependent, and my heart goes for them. So if I had the money, I might consider something like a safari. I think about all the people that build their business around tourist industries, or Caribbean islands, or places like that. So I wouldn't be going to a city trip. I wouldn't be going to a city. I'd be thinking, oh, where can I go that's exotic and lovely and supporting the community? So I think I'd be on a plane to somewhere in the Caribbean, Timmy.
Great choice. Can you take me with you?
You're on board. Come on.
I was going to say download the app first.
Exactly. Download the app first, and you can have a look. I'll come up with some recommendations.
Well, thank you very much, Timmy. So Selma, before I let you go, I have one more question, and that question is there anything that I didn't ask that you think I should have asked?
Oh, Kobi, it's too short a time now. It's too short, surely. You asked great questions. It's, when I think about the sort of careers, you're always thinking about those. What did you learn, and what were your failures, and how do you get comfortable thinking about those things and get to a place of comfort? Because the first part of my career always felt like a fight, like you're struggling, and then settling into, oh, okay, I have skills, I have experience, I have something to offer. And so I guess it's sort of how do you cope with that inner dialogue and find a way to be mindful and keep grounded for myself. That's tackling those inner thoughts. They can take you to a dark and moody place, and you really need to be mindful that that's like an inner tape, and you can turn it around. You can flip that around and think positively about and value yourself in that work environment. You all bring something to the work environment, and people like me and Kobi are looking for that. So really try to remember that and channel that, and think about what is it that you've learned from your experiences at Esade and other places, and how valuable that is, and how do you express that and bring that, because it is valuable.
Well, I would like to thank you for sharing your story today with us, Selma, and I think you've left us with a lot of golden nuggets. This recording will be shared later as well, so people who unfortunately didn't get the chance to be with us live can see the replay. I wish you obviously all the best. There's one thing that I know I still owe you, and that's the barbecue that's coming, so don't worry about it.
I know. Barbecue.
I've not forgotten about that, so it's going to happen.
I think Tammy's coming too at this rate.
I had to take myself off mute to invite myself in.
So obviously we wish you all the best in your job at the Skyscanner.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I know people can find you obviously on LinkedIn, and also people can check out the Skyscanner company opportunities that they could be interested in the future. And we will definitely talk soon. And I want to thank Esade as well for giving us the platform to share. Yeah,
it was really lovely to be invited, and you're a very gentle host, Kobi. So thank you very much. And to Temi and to Naomi, I really, really appreciated it.
Well, good evening, good night, good morning, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.